And welcome to yet another edition of the Kaufman Corner. Soren Petro with you, Rany Jazayerli. The good doctor is with us as well as we break down the Kansas City Royals and spring training for the Royals. As we look at it, what is the floor? What is the ceiling? I think we've seen a lot of floor the last few years. We'd like to see a little more ceiling when it comes to the Royals. Spring training happenings, Cole Ragans touching upwards of 100 miles an hour on a regular basis. Brady Singer has a new pitch. Alec Marsh has been pitching well. Carlos Hernandez is dinged up. Maikel Garcia and MJ Melendez appear to be hitting. We'll break it all down right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Trust me, it's here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. Do appreciate it. It is the Kaufman Corner podcast as we break down our expectations. What could be the best and worst case scenario? Well, more on that next week, too. I'll have a special guest next week talking about that, perhaps, who has penned a piece on said subject. But we start with the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. First of all, Rany, how are you, my friend?
I am well. What was that intro that you started there for 2 seconds? It sounded, I don't know, was it the intro to Stranger Things or something? It sounded creepy.
It was creepy in the sense that I have all these different little things I can do. Like I don't know. Would you like a little laughter, Rany? You're such a witty guy, right? No, I'm not sure I can.
Please don't ever play that laughter if I crack a joke ever again. Like that's like 1973
right?
Laugh track. I don't know, episode of some show that was canceled after 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, that's literally exactly what it is. As a matter of fact, so I have those, and there's different banks, and I hadn't put it over to the intro one. I'm pulling off the rare double, Rany. I'd like you to know. What I'm doing right now is, you're not aware of this, but as I sit here speaking to you, I'm also speaking to the television audience on KSHB 41.
You are a man of many talents.
Yes, it's a miracle. That's what it is. It's a miracle.
I will put nothing past you, my friend.
I am currently a guest on Sunday Sound Off as we speak. So yeah, it's you figure out which one's live and which one's on tape, people. One of them is and one of them isn't. And it ain't this one. I'll tell you that. I'll get to some of the comments here in a minute. But how do you want to dig into this? How do you want to talk about how the floor and ceiling look for the Kansas City Royals?
Well, like you said, the Royals have given us a lot more floor than ceiling in recent years, and I'm almost reluctant to put too high a floor on this team, because I feel like I don't recall if we did this exact scenario last spring, but if we did, or if we would have, I don't think either one of us would have had the floor at 106 losses. Like, even in our worst case scenarios, I don't think we saw the Royals finishing as badly as they did. So error bars on any baseball team are much wider than people think. Like, teams are capable of, both because of luck, just, the same team with the same inherent quality could finish anywhere between 75 to 85 wins very easily. But then you throw on top of that injuries, player breakouts, etc. Like, I think the range that this Royals team has is fairly enormous. I think let's start with the worst case. Yeah, let's start with the floor. Let's get that out of the way. And then we can talk about whether the ceiling, there is actually a scenario here where we could be playing into October, because I think that's what people want to know.
Okay. So how do you define the floor?
I mean, the floor is if the Royals' best players are either hurt or don't live up to that potential, and their lack of depth is exposed. The floor is 100 losses again. I mean, it's absolutely possible. Like, if Cole Ragans has looked great in spring training, but if Cole Ragans gets hurt at some point, I mean, he made 12 starts for the team after the trade last year. If he's limited to 12 starts somehow this year, and let's say Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha either show signs of decline or simply aren't able to throw that many innings, because in 2024 baseball, even veteran starters that you bring in to throw a lot of innings might be 140 innings. So if those guys are limited by injury and they miss a month or two and they're limited to 90 or 100 innings, they don't have the starting pitching depth to get through 3 turns of a rotation. There's absolutely a scenario where the pitching is not significantly better than last year. Maybe it's a tick up. The offense is maybe a tick up, but that it's certainly a downgrade from the second half of last year. And so, I'm certainly would not be at all shocked if the Royals lose 100 games this year. Things have to go wrong, but that could happen.
They'd have to go wrong, and they have gone wrong.
Right.
I think that's the reality. And I'm always a big believer in, that a ball club, whatever you think it is, whatever the ball club really is, let's say, what's the over under? 73 and a half. Let's say 73. Let's say they're accurate. They've got it right. And it's a 73 and 89 team, right? I always believe you can play up 10 games, down 20 reasonably. I think there's probably some magic scenario that says you can play up 15. And then you can probably play down 40. Like if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, everybody gets hurt, those kind of things, it can give it. You have a Padres like run where every 1-run game goes against you, every extra inning game goes against you. Like everything that could go wrong for the Padres pretty much did. They were still 500-ish, on the year. That's what I think it is. I think you can push up some, but you can plummet, because anybody who's got like a play through it injury suddenly gets surgery. Right? Like, okay, I'm going to call off the dogs and they're out. And then you really test the strength of the farm system, so on and so forth. So, so where did you put a number on it?
Yeah. So, I don't want to get too mathematically wonky here, but that is sort of my reputation. I guess I should live up to it occasionally. The standard deviation, if you were to take a coin and flip it 162 times, so we're talking about, a team that is truly a 500 team, not just that we're guessing, but truly a 500 team. You flip a coin 162 times, you expect on average to have 81 heads, right? But the standard deviation of that number, you can do the fancy math for it, it's about 6.5. So even if you nail the team quality, even if you know precisely how good a team is, there's about a 16% chance if you use one standard deviation as your average, there's a 16% chance that that 500 team on paper will win 74 games or fewer, and a 16% chance they'll win 87 games or more. Like there's a 1 in 3 chance they're going to be outside of one standard deviation. There's about a 5% chance that they will end up winning 68 games or less, or winning 94 games or more. Like, even if you know the team, they're just pure luck. And you see this every year, there'll be some team that goes, 29 and 10 in 1-run games, or 10 and 29. I mean, that's where you see a lot of the luck involved. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to predict which teams those will be, because from the same team that goes 29-10 one year typically will be at 500 or below the following year. So I agree. 10 games is kind of a good rule of thumb for what I use. But that's assuming you know how good they are. And a lot of times we don't know how good they are, because injuries will happen, and a player that you think is going to break out falls flat on his face, or some guy you've never heard of, steps in. I mean, Cole, for as bad as the Royals were last year, who had Cole Ragans being one of the 3 best pitchers in the American League the last 2 months of the season, 4th against City Royals. So there's, enormous error bars. But I think for the Royals, the problem is the lack of depth. They have decent frontline talent, and that's where they spent their free agent dollars to fill these holes. But the point is, they are holes. If those players don't come through, or if they're not available, the Royals don't have they don't have a lot of cavalry coming through the farm system in AAA. So I think they're pretty vulnerable to injury if that were to occur.
One of the things Kurt said, it'd be hard to plummet 20 games below 70 wins. That's 109 losses. We're talking about a theoretical number here, Kurt. First of all, let's not get them. We don't have the number. There isn't like this is what the Royals are. They're a 73 win team. That's what the win total is. That's what the betting win total is at FanDuel. So it's my rule of thumb is 10 up, 20 down from wherever you are, because when it does go bad, you bench guys, you have surgeries, you do things like that. And so, Randy, for all the reasons you just stated, I think that's pretty much where it is. But again, we're talking about a hypothetical, and even the Pacoda win projection, all the different win projections are just that, projections. We have not found they're almost never exactly hitting it on the button, so nobody really knows, right? Like that's what it is. But I do think that how far from, if this is not a 500 team, how far are they from it?
I mean, the 73 win projection, I think is fair. You know, I have them in the 74 to 76 range, which is coin toss away. But what that says is it doesn't take a ton of upside for them to get to 500. It takes several 2 or 3 good things happening, but more importantly, no disaster scenarios happening. Like, I think the biggest thing is, if there's one number you would really want to know before the season that could give you a guide to how well they're going to be, it's how many starts do the Royals get from Ragans, Brady Singer, Seth Lugo, Maikel Garcia,
and Lyles.
Not well. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, and maybe that's the thing. It's almost like I'd like to say Daniel Lynch, but the reality is, although there is some talk, that Lyles may end up, that Lynch may beat him out there, but let's just say those 4, because what the Royals do with the 5th spot, if you can get if those 4 guys give you at least 110 starts, I would feel very good about this team playing above their projected win total. If those guys all go through the season without a significant injury, then I think there's your upside there, and that they solve the 5th starter spot with something competent, whether it's Lyles, who's even Lyles was working at Tread this winter, and apparently he's got a new. I don't know if it's a new curveball or just he's made some changes to it, and added maybe a tick on his fastball. Yeah, so as Ethan is saying in the comments, but like if Lyles comes out with better stuff, okay, great. Or Daniel Lynch seizes that job. If that happens, I think 500 is very much a possibility for this team.
Yeah, I listen, a 500 club, I think you're right. One is a healthy staff, but it's Cole Ragans as an ace, right? Mm-hmm. If he's an ace, if you can check that box, or at least a 1-2, a James Shields, if he's a guy that can log the innings and put you in position to win a lot of games. Brady Singer, to me, when you talk about ceiling, it's tougher with young players because you're projecting what they can be, right? But we do have, Ragans is a lot of projection. He's never been a full season starting pitcher at the big league level. So there's a lot of projection there. But if you said Brady Singer is a innings eating solid guy that on any night can, go 7 and give up 1 run. Well, he did that 2 years ago.
I was about to say, if he just does what he does 2 years, right. He has actually done it before, right, over a course of a season.
Maikel Garcia has done it. Seth Lugo for a short stint has done it. So those 3 you can count on. You have to project. You have to put an if in front of Cole Ragans. If that comes through, you can figure out the 5th starter. By the way, let me just tell you, no on Daniel Lynch. I do not see it on Daniel Lynch. And you and I had a little back and forth. We were joking with each other about spring numbers because we were talking about, we could talk about Maikel Garcia's hitting and MJ Melendez hitting, and you're like, slow down on the spring numbers. I'm like, we're doing a show tonight. We're going to talk about something.
Yeah.
So
not our favorite time of the year. First week of March is so tough to do a show because what exactly do you talk about when you can't talk into spring numbers? Exactly.
7 games of spring training baseball. And I said, so, we're going to talk about something, but But the point is, the guys who have been there and done it, there are three starting pitchers that have been there. Even Jordan Lyles, when used in shorter bursts in Milwaukee and Oakland, has had some success. So there's less projectability as just like be the better version of yourself, right? Cole Ragans is the wild card. I mean, if those guys, if you get, average seasons, Singer more of a bounce back than an average, and Cole Ragans is this good, they're a long way down the road. Now, Salvador Perez has hit. We know that. It's an if on Vinny Pasquantino, if he can stay healthy. Everybody in Surprise seemed to think he could stay healthy. So I thought that was a good sign. Bobby Wood Jr. is going to hit. We've now seen that. That we don't have to worry about. You can count on him. Could he have an off year? Yes, but it'll be an off year, not a disaster. It's not going to be Alberto Mondesi. Right. We've already seen more out of him than we ever saw out of Alberto Mondesi. So you've got more there. And then that's kind of it, right? Because even Hunter Renfroe with the back injury is a question mark now, but he is at least hit. If he plays, you figure there's some power. But, there's so many questions with the bats. Now, there's a pedigree. Maikel Garcia has excellent exit velocity. MJ Melendez has excellent exit velocity and had a 40 home run season. But there's a lot of ifs there. So, if I were to get to the ceiling on the pitching, I could pitch their way into the mid to upper 80s if you're like, it's a really good offense. But it's all the questions on the offense. There just aren't enough places to hang your hat. If Vinny Pasquantino, so if you want to talk about what's the upper 5%, the upper 10%, if it all clicks, well, then Vinny Pasquantino hits 30, Hunter Renfroe hits 25, Salvador Perez hits 35, Bobby Witt Jr. hits 30 plus. All of a sudden you're like, wow, this is a really powerful lineup. If you start putting all those pieces together. But, Nelson Velasquez had great slugging percentage. He's another 30 home run guy. I can cook up a scenario where within the realm of who these players might go on to be is kind of a really stud player, is a 30 home run guy. There's, maybe 6 guys in this lineup that look like they could be that, right? I think Hunter Renfroe at his age and already messing with his back, you're looking at more like 15 to 20 in a platoon role. But it's the bats that keep you from saying there's no way all that clicks. So if half of that clicks and the pitching is the better version of it, 81 wins, 82 wins, 83 wins.
Yeah, see, it's a weird scenario that the Royals, that it almost feels like the pitching, certainly the starting pitching, and really with all the veterans they brought in, even the bullpen seems to have a higher floor. There's almost less downside with the pitchers than the hitters, assuming health. Like I said, the problem with the pitching staff is the lack of depth. So if they end up with injuries, they don't have guys to step in. And if we're getting tons of innings from Angel Serpa and I don't know, Veneziano and Mason Barnett's coming up because the Royals are desperate, then yes, of course there's downside. But the pitching staff is actually the safer of the two. And what's interesting is that,
which is staggering to think.
Right. Well, that's because they spent a lot of money in the short term to get Lugo and Waka and they went for guys who they didn't pay for upside with Waka. They paid for safety because they looked at themselves and said, we have the upside with Ragans and Singer. I think the Royals' philosophy is, they believe in Ragans. Absolutely, they should, based on what they saw. I mean, he has to prove he can do it again and do it for a full season. But based on what we saw, you'd be a fool not to think that as Cole Ragans, his upside is a Cy Young contender. And I think they believe in the upside of Brady Singer. That yes, there's certainly a lot of risk there. And yes, he's coming off a disappointing year. We'll talk about some of the things that we've heard about changes he's tried to make. But I can at least see the reason to think, okay, we have some upside with those two guys. Let's bring in 2 guys who can at least give us innings, league average, maybe slightly above, but league average innings we'll be happy with. On the hitting side, though, yes, there's definitely a lot more downside because these guys are so unproven. But let me just run through a list of numbers here, okay? Real quick. I'm actually kind of, we watched it all last season, and I'm kind of shocked by this. These are the ages of the 10 players who got the most plate appearances last year for the Royals. 33, that's Salvador Perez. 24, 25, 23, 23, 27, 26, 24, 25, 24. Like, I knew they were young, but that's actually younger than you just see those numbers. That's a lot of 25 and younger talent. One of those guys, fine, is Edward Olivares. He was actually the oldest. He was the 27-year-old. He's out the door. But they Nelson Velasquez, who's not on that list, was 24. Right, Nick Lofton was 24. Now you add a year into their ages for 2024, obviously, but there's a lot of youth here. That there's a lot of risk because very few of those guys are really proven at the major league level. But there is also a lot of upside, and that's why, like, if I would much rather see everything click on the offensive side, because if it clicks on the offensive side, and these guys have breakout years, they're young enough to sustain that for 3, 4, 5 years until the length of their contracts, really, with the Royals. And most of those guys are under contract for at least 3 more years. So you certainly would love to see breakouts on that side, because if things click, I think this team could be 85 to 87 wins, and in a position in July where if they need to go out and make a trade to actually try and make the playoffs this year, they could add to that. That could happen. I would say the odds of that are maybe 10%, but it's at least a possibility going into the season.
By the way, excuse me, I'm choked up about that information Randy just gave me. Gann Asphalt and Concrete proudly brings you the Kaufman Corner podcast, a nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Listen, I went someplace today, the parking lot poorly marked. I parked and I got out of the car, and then I saw, because there's a weird sidewalk, that there was a handicap sign, but it was not marked on the spot. So I got in my car and moved because I realized I was at a handicap zone. Then there was no other spot. If you don't want to piss customers like me off, have a brightly marked lot where they can easily identify what are and what are not the handicap spots, the signs, the concrete bumper, the markings, all of it. Again, Asphalt and Concrete handles it all. One contractor, all things parking lots. Don't piss off your customers like me, please. Have Gann come out and fix your parking lot. They've been doing it, like I said, for years and years and years. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, 30 years, celebrating 30 years, making Kansas City parking lots the best that they can be. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at gannasphalt.com. I want to come back to something Blake said. Blake said here, Blake's a friend of the program. I said, I think this team could go the way of their bullpen. Starting pitching will probably be mediocre in totality. I'm taking that to mean not terrible, right? A lot of times mediocre is considered terrible. He's just saying kind of average. Same with the offense, meaning a lot of close games like Randy was talking about. He said, I think this is interesting. He said, and this pen is so hard to project because it's been turned over so much, which is interesting because right behind it, Ethan said, bullpen is probably the best it's been in the last 5 years. So from a bullpen standpoint, I agree. I think we've got some certainty in the rotation. Where's your optimism on the bullpen and how much that will benefit this team in reaching a ceiling?
I mean, I have optimism it will be better than last year. I want to temper my optimism only because, like Ethan said, bullpen is probably the best it's been in the last 5 years because they brought in so many, pitchers with proven track records. The problem is with relievers are, the relievers are to baseball what running backs are to football. Like, you can be great one year and terrible the next. You can also be terrible and suddenly learn a new pitch and be great. I guess you don't really see that with the running backs in the NFL quite so much. But the point is, you don't want to overpay for certainty because in the bullpen, there's no such thing as certainty. And to the Royals' credit, they didn't. I don't think they overpaid for anybody in the bullpen. Will Smith on a 1-year deal, $5 million. There's very minimal downside there. And if he just maintains his performance from the last 3 years, he'll be a huge upgrade on what he's replacing. Same thing with Chris Stratton. Nick Anderson, if healthy, that guy could be the best of on a per inning basis. That guy is great. It's just that it's hard for him to ever throw more than like 40 innings in a season. So that's my concern with the bullpen. Basically, there's never certainty, and so the best way to build a bullpen is not to rely on 1 or 2 or 3 guys. It's to really have an organizational process for just developing relievers out of thin air. So every year you have 2 or 3 new guys who come in that nobody's ever heard of. They weren't high draft picks, but they're one of them's suddenly throwing 98 miles an hour, and the other guy's got a wiffle ball movement on his slider, and you churn out 2 or 3 good years out of them, and then you move on. That's what I that is what something we cannot answer as to whether or not the Royals will be capable of that. We saw some decent signs with James MacArthur last year. Carlos Hernandez for about a 2-month stretch being dominant, and then he fell apart. And obviously, going into spring training now, Carlos Hernandez's shoulders bothering him, and he's probably unlikely to start the season. And at this point, I think you just assume the worst and that we won't see him anytime soon. But the Royals have enough depth. I mean, they went out. This is why they got John Schreiber, so that we thought they may have too many options for the bullpen. I think that the bullpen spots now, it's much clearer as to who's going to be there. John McMillan, who you and I have talked about as being a guy who was excellent last year, my understanding is he's not unhealthy, but he's coming back from he had an elbow injury that shut down last season, and they're just being very, very slow to bring him back to make sure he's healthy. So he probably won't be ready to start the season, but that may open up a spot for Alec Marsh, who I really would love to see get an opportunity in the bullpen, or it may just mean Daniel Lynch is in the bullpen to start, and that gives the Royals another left-hander. So they do have a little bit of depth in the bullpen, but one or two of their homegrown guys really needs to take a step forward if it's going to be an excellent bullpen.
So let me ask you this: we'll give our predictions right in the pod right before the season starts, and we'll slap a record on it. Rany and I both were way off last year; had them at 77 wins. What are you feeling this year, wins wise? Because I want to put my 10 and 20 into whatever you're thinking.
Right. Like I said, I would say right now 75 is what is the number.
So 85 to 55, and 55 is obviously a terrible season, but they almost they win 56 last year.
Right.
So I think 73 is there. Like when I think of the odds makers, like because I always have to caution myself for you just being optimistic. You're giving them more wins. Last year we gave them more wins than we should have. Right. Obviously we blew it. We made a mistake. They're at 73, and I don't think any of the names that they signed while we're here in Kansas City I'm in Kansas City and going, well, this is exciting because they've got higher quality players. But I think if anything, the win total, and I know you're not a gambler, but you look at the numbers that come with it, that's got to be low, right? If you were going to say, okay, we're going to set it, all of our analytics say they're going to win this many games. Would you post that number if you wanted to draw even money on both sides of it? Or would you, off the history of the Royals and the reputation of the recent seasons, wouldn't you drop it? Like, there's no way their analytics came in at 69. They went, well, let's put it to 73 because we're going to get pounded on the over. So we got to bump it up. Right. So if anything, I think when you see 73, the analytics of the odds makers, I would think, came in higher than that. How much do they adjust it for expectation? Probably a win or two, maybe 3, not 8 or 9 or 10, right? But I'm thinking 75, 76, is probably where the numbers come in. And if that's the case, I'm at 86 to, 56, with most likely in the 86 to 66 range. And I think 66 would need a lot of things to go wrong. And I think 86 would need, like I said, half the things we talked about or 2/3 of the things we talked about to go right.
Right. And nothing to go wrong. And I think that's I think that rule of thumb we're using, like, it fits what I think about this team, right? Like, there is a best case scenario where they are playoff contenders, and there's a worst case scenario where they're no better than last year. I think that absolutely fits with the thinking. So I think I'm very comfortable with kind of a projection of mid 70s, but with obvious, large error bars.
Yeah. I'm intrigued though. Let's talk about some of the things we have seen here in Surprise Arizona. Then we'll relate it back to where it comes from with how we plug it into that floor and ceiling part of the equation. Cole Ragans touching 100 miles per hour, good or bad?
Well, we talked about it, last time. It was a little scary his first outing. So given that he already did it once, though, the fact that he maintained it in his second outing and wasn't throwing harder, but like throwing the same. I mean, this may just be who he is. Like, you watch him, you watch the actual pitches he's throwing. He doesn't look like he's overthrowing. He's not overexerting himself. Maybe he's just not capable of throwing, less than the upper 90s. I think the more important thing, I think, is that he's throwing strikes. I think his last on Friday was his most recent outing. He threw 3 innings. His third inning, I think he threw eight pitches the whole inning, and they were all strikes. Like, to have that kind of velocity and to be pounding the zone with it, like obviously he needs to stay healthy. We know that. He knows that. The Royals know that. But if he's healthy, the pitcher he is right now is, I think, one of the 10 best pitchers in the American League, and maybe better.
Yeah, I think the way he's throwing, I think the question is how many innings do you want to get from him? Right, 123 innings last year, 134 innings the year before. Like I really want 150 innings, and I'm looking with the movement and stuff he's got. I'm looking for times to skip him. Like I don't want to see 34 starts and him take the ball every 5 days.
Yeah,
this team is very much in the thick of a race.
Well, I mean, my hope is that they will, obviously, if they're not, in contention in August, September, yeah, like then you be extremely conservative with him. But I am of the opinion, and I speak as, somebody who, created a metric to measure how pitchers were being overused in the late 90s. This was, my hobby horse for the first 10 years of my career is that pitchers are throwing too many pitches, up through and including, watching Dusty Baker destroy Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood's arms on the 2003 Cubs. And I think the industry has gone too far the other way. Like, I think that if you've got a pitcher capable of being a Cy Young contender, if you have a chance, as long as you have a chance to make the playoffs, as long as you are in a pennant race, okay, maybe not 34 starts in 240 innings, but every year the best pitchers are throwing fewer and fewer innings, and teams are extracting less and less value out of them, which would be fine if there was evidence that this was keeping them healthier. But there's no evidence that the fewer innings that we're seeing being thrown by the best pitchers in the sport are reducing injuries, are keeping them out there longer.
Well, but come on,
career-wise.
aren't you just blowing right by your own research then? Like, don't you? They're all throwing. They don't throw as many fastballs, but they throw harder, and they all throw with a higher spin rate, which means some kind of torque on the hand. So why? I mean, to me, if I were on the other side, if I believed in what they were doing, and I were them, I would simply rebut you by saying, yes, we've lessened the workload to keep the injury rate at where it is. If we push it up, it's going to go up. You were right on your data. We read it, we consumed it, and we're doing what you told us. Get off our back, Rany.
Well, okay. So you're absolutely right that the argument, about, injuries haven't gone down. Yes, the counter argument is absolutely that pitchers are throwing maximum effort on every pitch, and that, yes, injuries would be higher if they threw like they used to. That argument I accept, but my concern is, like, when we were arguing about pitchers throwing too many pitches, they were routinely throwing 130 pitches in a start. Like, that was commonplace into the 21st century. Then that was all but eliminated from the sport, but then you still had guys throwing 120 pitches, which I think veteran pitchers, I think that there's definitely a correlation between, like, before the age of 25, pitchers' arms are much more susceptible to overuse injuries causing shoulder problems. But, like, the Max Scherzers of the world, Justin Verlander, guys who are in their 30s who've done this for years, they can handle 120 pitches. But even those starts eliminated. Okay, fine. Now, you don't even see guys throw 110. Like, the longest outing, if I had a few minutes, I'd look it up, but I'm not sure if a Royals pitcher threw 110 pitches in a start even once last year. And for young guys, sometimes some of these guys are throwing, they don't throw 100. And it's like, I do think you can extend guys into the 100 range, maybe a hard cap of 110. But when you see guys throwing 80, 85 every time out, it's like, maybe we could extend them another inning, another half an inning on average.
So, but like, whether it's listening to people like you or it's just traveling the same path and coming to the same conclusions you did earlier on, why wouldn't you think that they've gotten better, are more accurate at understanding what the workload should be?
I just think that teams have become.
But you have no data.
Well, the problem, my feelings, we don't have data that reducing innings is keeping them healthier, but we have plenty of data to suggest that pitchers are less valuable in the aggregate than they used to. We talked about this. There were 4 pitchers in the entire American League last year who were worth 4 wins above replacement. I mean, That's that's literally almost unbelievable how few pitchers. 4 wins for a position player is, you know, probably 25 guys in the American League had 4 wins. Like that, every team should have a 4-win player, but very few teams have 4-win pitchers because you're not allowed to throw enough innings to amass that. You can't. There's only so much value you have if you throw 140 innings in a season. Now, having said this, Cole Ragans last year in 12 starts for the Royals, he hit his pitch counts. He maxed out at 108. He had 106 as well, 105, 104, and 100. So in 5 of his 12 starts, he got to 100 pitches without ever going to 110. He actually averaged, because he was so efficient with his pitches, a little over 6 innings a start. So if he just makes 30 starts, like and then throws as many innings per start as he did last year, he'll be at close to 190 innings. I think that would be perfectly fine, and that would not be overusing him. And I think the Royals have shown that. So maybe it's partly because he was just so effective he couldn't help but throw that many innings. But I think the Royals handled him well. They got value out of him without ever extending him into a dangerous territory. So I'm optimistic the Royals will use him appropriately. And if he's healthy, though, that means he's not going to throw 140, 150 innings. It's more like 180, 190.
I'd be pretty happy targeting 150 to go to start, because I think unless if you're in the middle of a pennant race and you're right there in first place, then by all means, let's go. But if you're kind of trending towards that 70 some odd win mark, you're just kind of slowly easing down below 500. Like, what's the big picture? I mean, do you think this is a team that's going to contend while you control Cole Ragans? Now, you hope so, but let's remember, most of these guys are signed in these 1 plus a player. Like, they're going to have a lot of work to do next offseason, which I'm going to be really intrigued by next offseason. If Maikel Garcia has a great year and he's like, peace out, I'm signing a 3-year deal over here, do they go back and find next year's Maikel Garcia and give him the same thing, year plus 1? Seth Lugo, let's say, he's off to a slow start in spring training. Let's say he disappoints, and he's got the extra years. That's probably not the best guy, but whoever it is. And these guys, the bad ones are going to exercise it. It's fine. You hope for a bounce back year in year 2 while you pay them. But then do they jump right back out there? And this is what they're going to do every year. We're going to fill holes with 5 different, free agent signings. Great. Then we're off and running. But like for me, I don't want to see. I think the end game on Ragans, I think in the back of your mind, you have to be thinking we're probably going to trade this guy at some point, right? And we want to maximize the return. So blowing him out as we, are 12 games under or 12 games back is not what I want to see.
No, I completely agree. If the Royals are not, not in contention come mid-season, then you can absolutely throttle it back, keep him healthy, for future years, so that either he's ready to throw 200 innings when you're a contender the following year, or he's trade bait. But my concern is you don't know for sure going into a season if you're going to contend or not. And so to have a plan of using him, very, very cautiously, and then being surprised by the fact that you're in contention and you should always, not maybe always, but you should usually be planning for success. Like, you do not want to be caught flat-footed by the fact that you actually are in a position to succeed and you're not using one of your pitchers. And I'll give you the canonical example of this that really set my thinking on this, that I wrote about extensively at the time, and that was Steven Strasburg for the 2012 Washington Nationals. They announced that season that, like mid-season, Steven Strasburg come back from Tommy John surgery. They announced they were going to be shutting him down at the end of the season. And, oh, by the way, we're in first place and we're going to the playoffs almost certainly. And it's clear to me that they went into that season not thinking they were going to contend. And they had mapped out how many he was going to throw this many innings and we're going to shut him down. And they got flat-footed by the fact that they were in first place. And I mean, I guess to their credit, quote unquote, they stuck to their guns. He was shut down in September. They went to the playoffs.
Well,
they lost in the first round in best of 5 in 5 games. They could have desperately needed one more arm. And they missed out on a chance to go to the NLCS for the first time since the team moved to Washington, only second time in the franchise's history. And it's like, even if they had planned to be protective of his arm and limit his innings, they could have scheduled it where maybe he takes a mid-season break or whatever to be available in October. I just think that they didn't plan for success.
Well, and that's what I think you do with Ragans. That's why I mentioned skipping him along the way. You have an inning total that you want him to be at, and you have the plan breaks along the way on where you're going to do it, and so that he's around.
I think that's reasonable. I will say with Strasburg, he was literally coming back from Tommy John surgery. Like
Right.
in his case, I think I understand an innings limit, and you have to be a little more creative. With Ragans, the question is, what should that innings limit be? I think he could get to 180 as long as he shows no signs of fatigue. I'm comfortable with him throwing 180 innings this year.
With free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews, every project comes with a written warning. That's GAN Asphalt and Concrete, keeping your parking lot safer, helping you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. Make a great first and last impression with your customers, with your clients. With GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best, celebrating 30 years. Giving Kansas City the best parking lots around. Brady Singer. New pitch. You like this? Don't like it?
I mean, in theory, I like it a lot because it's not just one pitch. It's apparently 2 pitches that he's been working on. Andy Rogers wrote about this, that he has apparently, the Royals have been working with him apparently since middle of last season. They have been trying to get him to throw both a 4-seam fastball and a sweeper. And the data shows that he actually did throw a couple of sweepers last year, like very few, but a couple. I'm not aware of any 4-seamers. In theory, I mean, look, we have been talking about this since we started the podcast. Brady Singer needs a third pitch, and he still has the third pitch, the changeup, which he actually threw the changeup about as often as he did the year before, in the 5 to 6% range. The problem is, and his changeup actually wasn't any worse last year than it had been in his breakout 2022. The problem was his sinker and his slider were less effective, probably at least in part because teams have been able to just hunt for those 2 pitches because they just didn't respect the fact that he had a third offering, or certainly an offering he was going to throw very often. And when you think about the way pitches move, you want pitches that look the same coming out of the hand and then move in completely different directions, both vertically, horizontally, and on a time scale, obviously change, in terms of when they get to the plate. So when, he has a sinker that, bores down, but moves, in on a right-handed hitter. And then he's got a great slider that moves down and bores away from a right-handed hitter. So having a pitch like a 4-seamer that would actually move up relative to those 2 pitches, I think, would be a huge addition to his repertoire. I mean, the changeup would be great because of the movement on it is different than the other 2 horizontally, but vertically it moves down. It maybe moves down more than his sinker, but it moves down. To have a pitch that actually moves up, and then the sweeper moves sideways, but has, again, these are all different angles on a clock, right? One pitch is moving it down 7 o'clock, one's moving 5 o'clock. The sweeper may be more of a 9 o'clock motion, but maybe the 4-seamer is more of a 12 o'clock motion. Like, if he can master either one of those pitches, I think it would be huge for him. The problem is, if he's now got 5 pitches, like, you don't need 5 pitches to succeed. If you're Zach Greinke and you can throw 5 great pitches, great for you. We just want one of his third pitches to be excellent. He just needs 3 pitches. He just needs one that's really, really good besides his sinker and a slider. So I love the fact that they're trying it, but you don't want him to be dabbling with so many pitches that he can't master any of.
And you don't want him jerking around and with so many that he's messing with his delivery and starting to get off track and then ends up being hurt. Alec Marsh, so far in the spring, 4 innings, 3 hits, 1 run. Give him homer for that one and only run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts, right? I'm going to compare that to Daniel Lynch, who is 6 innings, 4 hits, 3 runs, 4 walks, 3 strikeouts. Spring numbers, don't put anything into them. I agree. But 2 young guys trying to prove that they are capable of getting big league hitters out. They're not the type of guys that it's like, well, he's working on a new pitch. They're not there. They should be having, if you're going to be if you're going to get me optimistic as a young guy, you need to be having success tangible, numeric success. Alec Marsh is not qualified to be working on something new. Alec Marsh needs to be perfecting what it is he does. And so getting good results is important. And Daniel Lynch is putting too many base runners on, not striking out enough compared to the walks. Daniel Lynch, to me, looks like the same Daniel Lynch when I look at the numbers. I'm no pitching coach. Alec Marsh, this is exciting, right? Like, are you more pessimistic about Lynch or excited about Marsh?
I'll leave the Lynch pessimism to you. But it's interesting to compare these two. I mean, they're one's lefty, one's righty, but both of them have they're not Brady Singer in the sense that they're limited with the variety of pitches, but they have elite pitches. They both throw multiple different, they don't need a new pitch. They need, like you said, to perfect the ones that they're throwing. And I think in Marsh's case, especially, is to throw more strikes with it. Marsh has better, I would say, certainly better velocity and probably better raw stuff than Lynch. Lynch is a little more refined and has more command, but command is only so valuable if you can't miss bats. So I'm not even looking at the spring training performance really, but Marsh was the guy coming into the spring training that was sort of my sleeper for the pitching staff. I really feel like in some role, but probably the bullpen, I think he can be valuable, and precisely because he's always been used as a starter, I still feel like he has all the hallmarks of a starting pitching prospect that just is not able to put it together in the rotation, but is an almost immediate success out of the bullpen because he can streamline his repertoire to down to just 3 or even 2.5 pitches, and he can throw a little bit harder. And all he really has to focus on is throwing strikes. So I'm cautiously optimistic that Alec Marsh will be an impact pitcher in some capacity for the Royals this year.
Let me ask you a question. Why aren't you pessimistic about Lynch?
I'm not. I'm neither pessimistic nor optimistic. Again, it's been whatever.
Let me ask you again.
Six,
why are you not pessimistic about Lynch?
Well, when you say pessimistic relative to what? I think he's capable of what he did last year, which isn't great. I think he could be a number 5, a decent number 5 starter. I don't consider that to be optimism.
What he did last year is a decent number 5 starter?
I'd have to look at exactly what he did last year here. 4.64 ERA, 5.17 FIP. I mean, yeah, that's borderline 5 starter. If he improves that by 5%, he'd be
improves.
Passable. Well, fine. Yeah, exactly. I'm saying the minimal improvement. I think he's better than. Maybe I'm just looking at him and just saying if he's better than Jordan. If the Royals have that, if that spot is better than Jordan Lyles' performance last year.
Yeah, we got to it. I think you're rooting for a prediction there.
No, I'm just saying that relative to what he would be replacing in my mind, I think he could be an improvement.
Daniel Lynch is 27 freaking years old. Not 21.
Yeah.
He's 27. And I'm not trying to be super sour, but in 68 innings in 21, he hung a 5.69 with a 1.63 whip. I know no one likes ERA, but everybody knows the scale, so I'm going to use it. 22, he had a 5.13 ERA and a 1.57 whip in 131 innings. And last year in 52 innings, he had a 4.64. The whip was 126. If you'd have said to me, because he showed progress because he had less base runners last year, I would buy something that you were saying, right? There's no reason other than you don't like Jordan Lyles. Okay?
Not the only reason.
He's 27 years old. He's not doing anything better in spring now than he's done in the past.
I'm not looking at 6 spring training innings.
Walking guys is walking guys, Randy's. If pissant AA insurance salesmen are walking, it's not going to get better when he faces big leaguers. That's my point. I agree. You don't put stock in spring training. But do you really think Daniel Lynch is crafting a new pitch up there? Or is he pitching for his job? He's pitching for his job, and it's not very impressive.
I mean, again, he may not even make the roster. If he doesn't, it's not I'm not expecting him to be the ace of this rotation. I think it would be a nice story if he could win the number 5. I don't see how that qualifies as me being uproariously optimistic about the guy.
I don't know. 34 Ks and 52 innings in his best year sucks.
Well, that's why I didn't make the case that he was better, he was making improvement last year because of his whip and his ERAs. Because he came at the cost of missing bats. He was trying to throw more strikes, and it worked for him in a short sample size. But I agree that he absolutely needs to get back to missing bats like he did earlier in his career, or it's not sustainable.
Ethan said, "What would be a good year for Brady 2 years ago?"
Yeah.
I mean, we have that on the books, Brady. I mean, I think if he could just go back to what he was, 153 innings, 323 with a 114, struck out 150 in 153 innings. That's what it looks like. You know, that to me is
That season was on our all-time Royals roster this Christmas
yeah,
time. So
yeah.
it was a really good year. We'll take that again. That was I think people forget. I mean, at the time, I think even at the time, part of the reason why I think it's underrated is that he was doing it with basically those two pitches, his sinker and a slider, and we were marveling at the fact that he was able to get away with it, start after start after start. But he did, he clearly did, and he did it for a whole season. And you break down the numbers. It's not like he was lucky. I mean, he had a strikeout to walk ratio of better than 4-1 that year. So he has shown an ability to be a number two starter. He was basically James Shields with fewer innings that year. If he can get back to that, I mean, that would be an enormous relief, I think, for the Royals that they could get that back into their rotation this year.
Let's end on a positive note before we say something about UL Washington passing away. Maikel Garcia and MJ Melendez are hitting well. You buying that, right? Like, are you? Is there a reason to be encouraged by MJ Melendez's 357, 438, 643 line? Is there a reason to be pleased with Maikel Garcia hanging 500, 583, 600?
I mean, again, it's like 12 plate appearances. Like, I mean, they're not even like if the best hitters in spring training by OPS on the Royals. Nick Prado has a higher OPS than those guys. Nick Lofton, somebody named Ryan Fitzgerald has a 1444 OPS. So, like, I don't want to put too much stock in those numbers. With Maikel Garcia, it all comes down to hitting the ball in the air. He has not hit home run. He's got one double and four singles. So, look, I still like him a lot. I don't think that there's any sign of a breakout there. Melendez, the thing about Melendez is he was making adjustments to his swing last year. In the second half of the season, he was holding his bat more vertically as the season went along, and that correlated with him having a much better offensive numbers in the second half that we've talked about. And so far in this spring, it appears that not only is he maintaining that vertical the vertical angle in his bat at the plate, but he's actually almost accentuated it more, and it seems to be reducing. And God knows I'm not a hitting coach by any means, but it seems to be reducing his load. Like he's not having to back up before he swings. It's simplifying his swing. He still has the leg kick, right? There's still some moving parts there, but he looks a little quieter at the plate. And if that is a concerted effort by the Royals, given that he already made some changes on this path last year in that it paid dividends, I continue to think that, like, again, in a world where the Royals are surprise contenders this year, MJ Melendez being like a surprising force in the middle of their lineup is, absolutely something that could happen. So yes, I'm cautiously optimistic that this could be the start of a big year for him.
Yeah, I'm encouraged. Yeah, I'm encouraged because I don't have to sit and talk about how MJ Melendez is 1 for 12. Right? Like, I think the more they can keep the negativity off them, the better it is. Like, are they going to hit? I don't know. Like who have they gotten their hits off? I don't know. But I know that, like, at least when you're hanging some numbers in the spring, we don't all have to sit around and be like, "Oh, he sucks." Right? Like there's
I just, the Royals I've seen the Royals win the Cactus League and then go out and lose 100 games. Like, I don't care. Seth Lugo he has numbers say he's been terrible. What is the one pitch that doesn't move in the Arizona air? It's the curveball. What is Seth Lugo's most important pitch? His curveball. Am I worried? No, I'm really not worried. He's given up some home runs because it's the curveball in the hot, dry air of Arizona in March. Curveball pitchers in general struggle in spring training. And conversely, hitters who struggle to hit the curveball hit the crap out of the ball in spring training. So I'm not going to get too worked up about it. But I'm looking for the other side. Like I said, his swing looks to be a little bit quieter. And, I'm hoping he has already a strong second half to build on. So I'm hoping that is, if you just take his second half numbers last year and double them, I mean, he would be, one of the two or three best hitters on the team, one of the 30 and the best in the league, probably.
Let's close with this, and I think this is quite poignant. Jeff said, I literally walked into the room with my toothpick in my mouth 1 minute ago. The wife asked me, what's with the toothpick? I said, UL died. We hugged, and she said, I loved UL. He was so young. What was his age?
I think he was 70. He
Okay.
passed away from cancer. Young, but we're reaching that point now. One of the blessings of being a Royals fan, it's a weird blessing, I suppose, is that the franchise was so young that even guys who are on the original '69 Royals, you think of like Lou Piniella, these guys were still, many of them are still with us. We're only now starting to lose some of those players from the early Royals teams. And UL came up in '77, played with the team for 8 seasons. I mean, he was a starting shortstop on a World Series team in 1980. I'm just old enough to remember the tail end of his playing days. And I mean, yeah, you couldn't bring up UL Washington without mentioning the toothpick that was always in his mouth. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he was able to focus on playing baseball while having that toothpick in his mouth, but he pulled it off, and he just had that cool vibe. He was a decent player, wasn't a great player, but between playing for a winning franchise and that toothpick, he just exuded a kind of coolness that transcended the quality of his play on the field. And I saw a lot of people today, not Royals fans, just old time baseball fans, who remember UL very fondly, for a guy who, was only an everyday player in the majors for 3 or 4 seasons, but was, everybody from that era remembers UL Washington.
Career 251, 313, 343. Look at no awards to it, but was a part of those Royals teams that finally broke through in 1980 and went to the World Series. And not bad to be a starting shortstop on a World Series team. Pretty good career.
Absolutely.
And famously part of the academy.
Absolutely. I was going to say the lesson, if there's a lesson that you want to take from UL, it's just how far ahead of its time the Royals Academy was. And I'd like to talk about the Academy every chance I get, because it remains a unicorn in the history of the sport. A team spending lots of money to go out and find athletes, American athletes, some of whom had a very limited baseball background, but could run, who could throw. They just tested their raw skills and literally taught them how to play baseball, at a professional level. It was the brainchild of Ewing Kauffman, who was the owner of the team and one of the most forward-thinking owners in the sport's history. And it took an outsider to come up with this idea, because everyone in the industry thought it was lunacy to think that you could take raw talent and turn any of these guys into major leaguers. And I kind of understandably so. I'm still kind of shocked that it worked to the degree that it did. But, everyone knows Frank White as the shining, graduate of that academy. But people forget, I want to say 13 or 14 players that the Royals signed through the academy reached the major leagues, at least played one game in the major leagues. They only had the academy open, I think, for 4 draft classes, essentially, before Ewing Kauffman was forced to shut it down because the costs were mounting, and I think he was having some financial difficulties at that time. And he later would say, after his financial fortunes had turned, and he could afford it again, that shutting down the academy was one of the great regrets he had as the Royals owner. I mean, you just look at a 4 actual drafts, and you would be hard pressed to find more than about 13 or 14 players reach the major leagues. These were all undrafted guys. UL Washington, his double play partner in the minor leagues for part of that was Ron Washington, who had a very small, short major league career as a hitter, but is a very accomplished major league manager. And there were so many other guys as well. So he came into the sport with having played a little in high school and was fast and had some defensive ability, and he learned how to switch hit in Double-A, I believe, or Triple-A even, and turned himself into an average major league shortstop for 4 or 5 years. I still think to this day, I think that there is an opportunity out there for an enterprising owner who's willing to try to invest to essentially recreate what the Royals did with their academy. You think about how many people, how many athletes there are in America today, unlike 50 years ago when baseball was still a preeminent sport, in even in lower income neighborhoods. Today, there are guys who might be phenomenal athletes who are playing high school and college football, have never picked up a bat in their life. And you think what Lorenzo Cain famously didn't play baseball till he was 16 and turned into an all-star and an MVP candidate. I still think there's an opportunity out there to find more UL Washingtons if a team is so inclined.
R.I.P. UL. It was great to watch him play. That's for sure. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, every project come with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete keeps your parking lot safer. Contact him today. Find him online at gannasphalt.com. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman